glad that you guys joined us today. We have an awesome speaker who has a lot of interesting stories to share with us, and I know you'll really enjoy it. So I'm going to introduce Brandy Buzzard Frobos from Greeley, Kansas, and she's going to fill us in a little bit about her background. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things before Brandy gets started. There is a chat at the bottom of your screen. If you haven't clicked on that already, please do. And if you have any questions throughout, don't hesitate to type those in. And then at the very end, after she gets through her presentation, we'll open up for those questions and ask her those. If you have any problems or anything with the chat or any struggles that way, don't hesitate to make those comments there, and we'll be watching for those and try to help. So this will be recorded, and we are going to be sharing that on social as well. So if you have friends or colleagues who couldn't be with us today, please help pass that on. So with that, thank you so much, Brandy, for joining us, and it's all yours.
Well, thank you for having me. I am excited to be here. I'm gonna go ahead and jump over to share my screen so you guys can all see me and I can't see you, and just letting you know how massively uncomfortable that makes me. So just bear with me. And now I can't find my PowerPoint, of course. Okay, here we go. So I am Brandy Buzzard Frobos. I'm from Greeley, Kansas. The Red County is where I live. I've lived in Greeley like most of my life. A little bit of background on me. I grew up rodeoing in 4-H and FFA and like all those ag kid things. I went to Fort Scott Community College when I was right out of high school and did like basic science and ag education classes, and then transferred to K-State where I got my bachelor's in animal science and ag econ double major. And then a few years later, I got my master's in animal science and animal behavior and welfare. So there's a lot of purple in our house. My husband has 3 degrees from K-State also. So we are diehard purple people, and I can't believe I didn't wear purple. I feel like a failure. In terms of career, after grad school, I started working at the Beef Cattle Institute and as part of Kansas State Research and Extension. And then from there, I went to National Cattlemen's Beef Association, where I was the associate director for issues management for about 4.5 years. And in August of 2017, I joined the Red Angus Association of America as their director of communications. So at Red Angus, I touch all pieces of communication. I'm not in charge of all of them, but I do touch a lot of them. So editing, writing for the magazine, our social media, press releases, event coordination, all that, public relations, media interviews, all that kind of stuff. So I work with a great team, and we produce a lot of content, and I think that we pack a powerful punch. So this is just a little bit a glimpse of me. That's me and my husband and my daughter. She will be 3 in December. There's me rodeoing, and then this summer it was hot, so we had to clean a horse. So my little bitty minion was helping with that, and then I'm sure we certainly have some of this blizzardy weather coming soon, but these are just some of the kind of insight into my life. I do work remotely I do work remotely for Red Angus, and also I worked remotely for NCBA. So I have not worked in an office since 2013. So going on 7 years. This is my office now. And I do travel to industry events and then also to our office in Denver, Colorado, about once every quarter or something like that. Just to touch base and stay face to face with our other staff members and our board members. So I was asked to speak about why I advocate, or more like why advocacy is work worth doing. So for me, the why is some of the whys are pretty simple. So as we all know on this call, in this webinar, there's a pretty strong lack of consumer attachment, and I show this slide at every advocacy presentation I give, because I think it's important for people to know that, as funny as that is a reality that there are people there who think that food just comes from the grocery store, that chocolate milk comes from brown cows. All of these pieces of misinformation about agriculture, those are real. That is a real thing. So I advocate, and I think it's work worth doing so that people can know the real facts about where their food comes from. There's also a popularity of bad information, and I hope this plays. This is a commercial about just how rampant misinformation is. And it isn't necessarily in a malicious way, but just in a, people just really don't understand agriculture.
Mom, I really like this. Cute. What's it made of? Wool. Like from a cow? Uh-huh. Duh, Ashley. All wool comes from a cow. Does cashmere come from a cow too? Uh-huh. The boy cow or the girl cow?
If there's any place that could really use a county fair, it's LA.
The boy cow. Oh, okay. Oh, you mean the one with the tusks?
The LA County Fair. Kinder, simpler, funner.
So again, that's really funny, and I show that video a lot, and I laugh. I've probably showed it hundreds of times, and I laugh when I show it, but like that's not made, I mean, it is a parody, but it's not based on like false facts. Like, people think these things. And then for nothing else, I advocate because I love this lifestyle. I will at some point will be on the ranch full time, and I love raising our daughter in this lifestyle. I love being able to be with the land and raise cattle. And that for me is extremely important, to be able to preserve the land and the heritage and this lifestyle for not only Oakley, my daughter's generation, but for many generations after that. So that's why I believe that agriculture advocacy and just shining a light on agriculture is just extremely, extremely important. And I focus more of my efforts on beef production because I raise cattle, but I'm an advocate of all agriculture, whether it be raising crops or hogs or poultry or something like that. I'm a supportive of all those things. I'm just not as knowledgeable about those. So when I speak in public or on TV, it's almost always about cattle, because that's what I know. So I think it's really important to know who your audience is. Before you get started in advocacy, or if you're talking to your members about being advocates, or they ask you questions, the number one thing that when I was with NCBA that we always taught our Masters of Beef Advocacy grads was like, you have to know your audience. So it's the number one thing you think about before you get started. And figuring out your target will save you time and stress, and it's going to make your efforts go a lot further. So my target audience is not necessarily urban parents, but any parent who's interested in food or agriculture or gardening. There are a lot of people that follow my page who garden, but aren't necessarily proponents of big food. So it's not necessarily an interest in one specific area. It's food and ag in general, gardening, cattle, kind of this rural lifestyle in general. That is my target audience. So I know when you know your target audience, you're not going to waste as much time. You're going to resonate more with them. If I am creating content and I'm trying to reach that like millennial or like mid to late 30s, early 40s parent that's interested in food, but I'm creating content that's like more focused on college kids and things like that, like that time is wasted because I'm not reaching the right audience. So it's just really important to keep your audience at the forefront of your mind. That way your content resonates with it and it's worthwhile. And that's what we're talking about, is being worthwhile. So an example of not knowing your target audience is when I started my blog 10 years ago. I just saw that date. About 10 years ago, I started blogging, and my family's gone to the American Royal for years. So I wrote this blog post for my blog and put it up on there. And to this date, usually when I do a live presentation, I do like a question and answer, and then I give people a prize if they're close. But to this date, 10 years later, this blog post still has less than 100 views. I didn't know my target audience. I was just blogging because honestly, I love to write, and I had written a really long letter to the editor when I was at K-State as a student to rebut some really poor agriculture, like critical agriculture articles about, they were saying things like milk causes osteoporosis, and they were talking about, they were really bashing a lot of conventional agriculture practices and talking about you know, animal cruelty and things like that. So I had written an article to rebut one of those, and it didn't get picked up because it was way too long. So I sent it to Drovers, and they published it. And from there, that's when I decided I wanted to start blogging. So I started this blog, and this is my first blog post. And I clearly didn't know what I was doing because 10 years later, it's only had 100 views. So knowing your audience is extremely crucial to being able to reach people with your desired message. These are two people who have really nailed down their target audiences. This is my friend on the left, top left. Her name is Taryn Dreeling. She is a rancher in the Sandhills of Nebraska. She and her husband manage an outpost ranch for the Rex Ranch. And her target audience is people or families who want to fuel their families with safe, wholesome, and nutritious food, but they have concerns or reservations about beef. She has a very specific target audience. She wants parents who want safe food, but have concerns or reservations about beef. If it doesn't fit that audience, she doesn't post it. And she does a great job curating her audience. She has built her page. Her Facebook page is has 30,000 followers. She's done a really great job. Darren, this is the other one, the Beef Man. That is one of my old colleagues from NCBA, Darren Williams. And I can't actually see, he might be on the call right now. I have no idea, but I can't see the list of participants. But if you are here, Darren, I'm using your blog, thanks. Darren's audience, when we were NCBA, it always made me laugh, but it's very effective. And he called it the mammal, middle-aged men in Lycra. I'll just let you think about that for a minute, middle-aged men in Lycra. But everything that Darren wrote about on his blog was at that target audience. So he's very active. He did triathlons and cycled a lot, and he loves eating beef. And he talked about his weight loss journey and how beef played a huge role in that. And he shared all that on his blog. And he has a huge following based on those that specific criteria and the things he shares about cycling and how beef fuels his cycling habits. So both very effective, two very different audiences, but both very effective at spreading a positive beef message. So again, all the content that you create or that your members create, if you're talking to them, should be done with your target audience in mind. Because again, if you're not thinking about your target audience, it's just not as worthwhile. So a few thought starters for how I kind of think of content that needs to be done is, what activities are people in my audience doing right now? So are they getting ready for the holiday meals and planning their meals out and things like that? Are they training for half marathons? Those kind of things. At one point in my life, I ran like 20 some miles a week. I don't do that anymore, unfortunately, but that was a big drive on my blog and my advocacy efforts, was connecting through people through fitness and what I was eating. Some thought starters are what hot issues are taking place in agriculture right now and what trends and topics are rising. So, and topics right now in ag and trends are, faux plant-based meat alternatives or protein alternatives. So those are really important that I'm keeping watch on. Those are hot issues that I keep thinking about ways to talk about or put on my blog or put on my Facebook page. And then also, what platform does your audience like? So Snapchat is not my advocacy tool because I'm too old to be on Snapchat. I have been told to be cool on Snapchat. I have been told by a few of my sisters-in-law. And there's always new social media platforms coming out, but the ones that I have found that my audience is most on is Instagram and Facebook. So that's where I am most. I spend more of my advocacy time on Facebook and Instagram than I do on Twitter or TikTok or Snapchat or something like that. So you want to go where your audience is. Find common ground. You guys probably all know exactly these kind of things, but if you're trying to connect with people and create content, you want to connect with them on a one-to-one basis so they get it, so that you feel relative to them. So finding common ground. I don't have anything in common with a 35-year-old vegan with no kids who lives in like downtown New York City, other than the fact that I eat, that we both eat, and that is the common ground. So you can always find that. You want to ask questions. I learned when I was working at NCBA that there's a difference between, Darren taught me this, it's about listening to be heard versus listening to speak versus listening to be heard. So listening to be heard versus listening to understand. So listening to understand is when I'm like having a conversation with you, Angie, and I'm truly listening to you and like understanding what you're saying and hearing your story. And I'm asking questions about what you're saying so I can better understand. Listening to be heard is just waiting for the other person to finish their conversation so that it's my turn to talk. So those are the big differences. And it's really important to know the differences between those when you're having an advocacy conversation so that you can relate to people and not just start spouting facts. Along those same lines is giving personal examples. Now that I'm a mom, I can connect with other moms because we're all trying to give our kids, safe, healthy food. And then staying informed is really important. Like if someone's asked you on your blog or your Facebook page, what did you think of that recent study about beef and heart health or something like that? And if you don't have any idea what they're talking about, it's kind of hard to make a comment about that. So I don't read every newspaper or newsletter every single day, but I do try to stay a little bit informed and read news while I'm, getting started from a day and drinking my tea. So how do you advocate? Or more specifically, I guess I should want to talk about how I advocate and the ways that are effective for me. So I do a lot of social media. And as Graber would tell you, I am not, or anybody who's known me for more than 5 minutes will tell you, I'm not afraid to be direct and upfront, and I'm very authentic. So I post things on Facebook that sometimes make people uncomfortable, but they create conversations that they create meaningful conversations. And I also like to share things on social media that are easy for people to understand and be bite-sized, and they can take it and go. So this graph that's on the screen, I just took this off the USDA website. It's just a screenshot of a comparison, or maybe it wasn't off of USDA, but it's just a screenshot of a comparison of the calories and the nutritional content between real beef and the Impossible Burger. And I just put that on there and did a little caption, like, as you can see, it had 1,500 shares. Like, bite-sized information is so much easier for people to take and understand and share than it is like a big, long scientific analysis of something. Whereas this is science, but it's more easily, people can ruminate on it better. Pardon the beef pun. I show glimpses behind the scenes. Some people are wary to talk about antibiotics, but those are a real tool that we have to have on the ranch. We're coming into the wet, rainy, cold season, and I'm hoping I don't have any calves to treat, but the reality is I probably will. So I'm not gonna like take a picture of me like jabbing a needle into a calf and that be the picture I share, but it is important to talk about the tools that we use. So this is one way that I'm able to do that. Like I said, people like infographics and bite-sized things. This took me a really long time to make, but it was really effective. It's just a picture of all the food byproducts. It's basically talking about food waste. So what food byproducts of human food consumption do cattle eat that makes them more sustainable and helps reduce our food imprint and reduce food waste? So people like fun facts that they can share easily. And then people also, as we all know, based on the popularity of that lady screaming and that stupid white cat, there is people love memes. So this is from the Summer Olympics 2016 when the South African swimmer was like dancing and jiving right in front of Michael Phelps, which in hindsight was probably a really bad idea because I think it just fueled Michael Phelps to win even more. But I made this, when someone talks about pork chops being hormone free, all pork and all poultry are added hormone free because it's illegal to use them. So this has done really well. I share it like every year during pork month, and it always does really well. So I try to create like eye-catching, impactful content that people can take and run with it, and it's easy to share. So that's kind of my methods on social media. In person, this says farm raised, but in person, I do a lot of like personal examples, and I guess I talk about like what burns my bacon. So the labels that frustrate me. So I show, for example, this commercial from Chipotle about it was a commercial from like maybe like 8 or 9 years ago, but it was about going back to the start. And this farmer has a large farm, and he's raising pigs indoors and he's raising dairy cows and things like that. And then he decides to go back to the start, and he tears it all down, and all the animals roam around the hills in complete happiness, and there's no tragedies, and everybody lives a glorious, happy life, the end. But I talk about how that's not realistic, and like how far back to the start does Chipotle want us to go? To oxen, because I always tell people that I'm not made for this. I'm 5'4", $115. I'm not made for this. And even if I was made for this, I don't want to do it anyway. So how far back to the start are we going to go? So I try to get humor and real life pictures and things involved as much as I can, because I figure if the audience is laughing, then maybe, I don't know, if I can get personally, if people will laugh a little bit, I'm just a lot more comfortable, and I'm aware that they're actually listening to what I'm saying. So it's really important for me to try to add humor into personally when I'm speaking. I also talk about how if we can only eat what we're going to raise, then a lot of people are going to starve, because how do you raise enough food for yourself in a metropolitan area or on the rooftop of your apartment building in New York City? And I also talk about it from a standpoint of that not everybody loves vegetables and such. For example, I love gardening, so I show these pictures of a pretty great harvest of cucumbers and tomatoes and peppers and some eggs from our chicken coop. But I also talk about how I don't like vegetables, and if I've not figured out how to grow Cheetos and ice cream on plants yet. So what am I going to do if we're only supposed to eat what we can grow? So I just lend those kind of lessons to the great privilege we have of food diversity and a great infrastructure and farmers and ranchers who are willing to grow whatever the consumer demands. So I just try to make it as personal as possible. And again, with the humor. And then I tell stories about why we raise animals indoors, and you can certainly raise animals outdoors and do free range. That's definitely possible. There's a market for that. It delivers a premium, and more power to people who do that. However, there are some sacrifices to consider. You know, there's going to be higher death loss on some of those free range operations. And I talk about how I built my chickens at Fort Knox, and I bought like chicks and they didn't make it to 10 weeks. So it's just important for people to understand that like agriculture is doing things the way we are for a reason, not just because we're out here aimlessly wandering around in the sticks and we're bored. You know, we have developed the methods we have today based on science and technology and trial and error, and these are the way we do things for a reason. So again, with humor and a little bit of scientific fact, and just sharing with people like the reality of being a farmer or rancher. And then again, with the being authentic and being direct, this was the picture that made my Facebook page kind of go viral the first time. The GMO, I'm really big on GMOs. There's two types, and I hope I don't offend anybody with this, but there's two types of people that I just don't have much tolerance for, and that is the anti-vax crowd and the anti-GMO crowd, because both of those things save lives. So when I see something about GMOs that I think is not okay, I will call it out. So I took a picture of this in the grocery store. I was taking grocery shopping for my daughter at the time, and she was on solid foods, and I had been told, well, you can make baby food, and I don't really want to make baby food. I didn't have the time nor the desire to do that. And I got frustrated because I saw that Gerber had this non-GMO label on their carrots, and there are no GMO carrots on the market. So essentially it's a fear-based label. It's not necessary. It's unnecessary, and it's just playing on people's fears. So I took this picture and put it on my Facebook page. It had about 11,000 people like it, and it had thousands of shares. And I got called a bad mom. I tagged Gerber and was trying to get their attention, but I got a lot more attention than Gerber did. A lot of disparaging comments and hurtful words were said, but I also had a lot of people asking me questions about GMOs and asking for clarification about what a GMO is, or what 10 crops are GMOs and that kind of thing. So I had to take a break from social media after that because my feelings were a little hurt. But in the big picture, that kind of direct, open dialogue really had a benefit for some people. So being direct does have its benefits. So before I go into this next bit, being direct led me to when the Green New Deal came out in February, or was proposed in February. I'm kind of transitioning here in a not very smooth way, but I read the Green New Deal and the FAQs, and I'm sure everybody here has probably remembered that there was a mention of cows farting in that FAQ. And that really struck me, because whether or not cows emit flatulence, they don't. there is legislators out there that believe they do, and they don't have a great understanding of how cows play a role in our society and how they're sustainable and those kind of things. So I wrote a letter that I felt was very respectful, and I put it on my blog, and it erupted. It crashed my blog. I put it on Facebook and I put it on my blog, and it crashed my blog 3 or 4 different times. I was at the Dixie National Livestock Show, beef show, while this was all happening, and was kind of having a website crisis. So if you're going to post something you think goes viral, make sure that you have your website prepared for that. And that led to, after I posted it about a week later, I got an Instagram message from Vaughn Hilliard, who is an MSNBC anchor, or field anchor. And I was like, oh, is this legit? What's going on? And I thought it was just wanting a quote. No, it wasn't a quote. He actually wanted to come to our ranch and talk to me about the letter and farmers and ranchers' role in sustainability. So this following little section is about what I did to prep for those. I have 3 different interviews to show and kind of the key takeaways from each one. If anybody has questions, you absolutely shout them out or type them or whatever. I'm happy to stop and answer them. But so this section is all about media prep and that kind of thing. So media prep tips. If someone sends you a message on Instagram and says that they're a journalist from MSNBC or Fox or CBS or something, you really should do your research on that journalist or the anchor. Google them, find out what other kind of stories have they done. Ask them questions. What kind of questions are you going to ask me? Are you going to ask me about my political affiliations? Get as much information about what they want before they get there. Utilize your resources. 2 of these 3 interviews did not come about by checkoff placement. It was just the reporters reaching out to me organically, but the beef checkoff was amazingly supportive and helpful in prepping me for that interview. I used to train people to do media interviews at NCBA, but it never hurts. It's always beneficial to have people run you through the ringer. So I had practice interviews with Dr. Sarah Place, who was the lead sustainability professional at NCBA, and a few other members of the issues and crisis management team while I was there, and they helped me develop my few talking points and run me through the ringer and just ask me those tough questions so I was ready for them. You need to practice, practice, practice. So like I said, they asked me the same question over and over until I was confident that I could answer it. And part of that was having 2 to 3 sound bites that I wanted to fall back on. So my messages were that cattle are part of the climate change solution. Cattle are only responsible for 2% of greenhouse gas emissions, according to the EPA. And my third one that was cattle are actually they're beneficial for the environment because they lead to, I haven't practiced in a while, as you can see. They lead to carbon sequestration, and they help our agriculture be more sustainable. So I had these sound bites that these were the things that I was determined to deliver, regardless of what question I was asking. And then something really important that I take very seriously now, and it's kind of difficult to do if you're not focusing on, it's not the focus of your day, but if someone's coming to your farm and ranch, you want to try to clean it up as best as you can. So like I picked up buckets that weren't supposed to be, they were just kind of like laying in unfortunate places. And I made sure that like the 34-year-old rope horse who was sway backed and obviously not in like prime fleshy condition in February when these interviews happen, was at the back stall, would not be on camera, that kind of thing. Basically, if someone's coming to your ranch and you don't want it on national TV, you need to hide it or clean it up, because there is no off the record. I cannot explain how important this is. The minute they get out of their car, everything you say is off the record. Whether you curse, you say something unfortunate about cattle, or or pork or something like that. There is no off the record. So you just have to keep that in mind. Be very choosy with your words. That's where practice, practice, practice is extremely important. So this is the first interview. This is the MSNBC interview, if I can get it to work here. So I'm just going to switch my screen over here. Can you guys still see that? Angie, can you see the internet screen here? I can't hear you.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, we can, sorry.
Okay, So this is the MSNBC interview.
And for that, I'm turning to NBC's Vaughn Hilliard, who joins us now from a farm in Amana in eastern
Oh,
Iowa.
I'm going to fast forward to my
more about the cars and all that
bit
kind of stuff.
here.
What did you hear when we asked her what she thought about the Green New Deal?
I am a big proponent of the fact that the specific Green New Deal policy proposition says that the proponents want to work with farmers and ranchers to make ag more sustainable, and they want us to work together. I'm supportive of that. I want farmers and ranchers to be part of that decision-making process and for us to have a voice in Washington.
Now, there's about 8% of greenhouse gas emissions here in the United States are about 8% come from agricultural industry. So the question is, how, if there is the opportunity to do it, how do you cut it back even more? Well, you can't really...
Okay, so that was my whole segment. They were there at my ranch for like what seemed like forever, but they only used that about that 45-second clip of me talking. And they, like I said, they were there a lot. So some of the takeaways from that, from MSNBC specifically, is that it's very off the cuff setting. It was live action. There wasn't any setup. There wasn't, two cameras. Many times, a lot of the footage, we were just walking around in the cows. There's another segment from it that I don't have that was like another different 45 seconds in there. There was another one. So it played twice during the evening news. But basically, I made it very clear what was on and off limits. So I didn't say that this is off the record, but I told them I'm not going to answer questions about my political affiliation. Don't ask me, what do I think of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? I'm not going to answer that. I'm not going to answer who I voted for. Like, I'm just not answering political questions because sustainability is not a political initiative. It's about maintaining our environment and making sure that agriculture is here for many generations. So I was very clear about that in terms of on and off limits. So that's different than on the record or off the record, because off the record, you might say something and think, oh, don't say that, don't use that in the article. But I've just made it very clear to them, like, don't ask me this. I'm not going to answer it. You don't have to know the answer to, you don't have to answer anything that you don't know or don't feel comfortable addressing. So again, I wasn't going to address political affiliations. So if they did ask me a couple of those questions and I just said, I'm not going to answer it. And then they kept rolling and they obviously didn't use that footage. And then that you don't know. If they had asked me about anaerobic digesters or the shortage of propane for grain drying, like I just would have said, I don't know, that's not my thing. Like I very clearly was asked to talk about the sustainability, and that's what I was sticking to. So if you don't know the answer to something, you don't have to answer it. Again, you got to have your talking points ready. Unfortunately, in that segment, my talking points were not used in that segment, even though I said greenhouse gases are only 2% from cows, according to the EPA, probably 25 times. They unfortunately didn't use that. And you'll think this is funny, but even though it's factual that cows don't fart, don't say fart on national TV, even if you are correcting misinformation, because I guarantee you that Stephen Colbert and the guy that does like the Late Report or Last Week Today or something, like all of those like one-hit shows are going to use the segment of you saying cows don't fart in their little promos. So unless you want to see yourself across national media saying something like that, just say cows don't emit flatulence or something, but don't say that specific F word if you can get away with it. The next interview I did, and this is probably the one I learned some pretty difficult lessons from, was Fox News. This one was about a month later. My article got like re-shared by a very large Facebook page, and it kind of invigorated the push behind it. And so this was Fox News. This one was as you notice, the background is the same. This one was in my office. I just realized I'm wearing the same shirt that I have on in that picture, and that was not on purpose. But so this was done from my office at about 3:30 in the morning in March. I think this one will play. Maybe. It's very close up in my face. Sorry. Oh, don't do this. And apparently we have to watch an Amazon ad. I'm really sorry. I didn't know it was going to do that. Only 4 seconds left. Okay, so here, this is the Fox News
A
ad.
Kansas rancher is calling out Ocasio-Cortez for targeting cows in her Green New Deal proposal. She writes, I beseech you to please have a conversation with your constituents and colleagues that have an agricultural background. Cows are not the problem. Well, that rancher, Brandy Buzzard Frobos, joins me now with more. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I definitely enjoyed your blog post on all of this. Let's bring up one of the original quotes from AOC about the Green New Deal. She says in this, we set a goal to get to net zero rather than zero emissions in 10 years because we aren't sure we'll be able to fully get rid of, cows passing gas and airplanes that fast. She uses a different word there, but you say, that's not the problem. You and your family, you're cattle ranchers, and you think she doesn't really know what she's talking about. Tell us about that.
Well, I wrote the letter to Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez because I wanted her to know that farmers and ranchers are the original environmentalists. And honestly, cows are part of the solution. Cows are superheroes, and are honestly the original plant-based protein. And I just wrote the letter because I wanted her to know that farmers and ranchers want to be part of the conversation in the climate solution moving forward.
And right now, the United States is actually producing beef more sustainably and more efficiently than ever before.
Absolutely. As I have mentioned in the letter, cows actually don't pass gas. They burp, and they actually only are responsible for 2% of greenhouse gas emissions in our nation. And the trade-off for that 2% is that we get a lot of really tasty steaks and roast and hamburger.
Yeah, so originally this was in one of her original posts, and it was actually taken down. Did you get any response from her? Where does that stand?
I have not heard personally from the Congresswoman. However, I did see in the news yesterday that she has reached out to Dr. Frank Mitloehner, who is one of the world's leading climate and agricultural sustainability scientists. So I feel that that was a good step in the right direction.
What do you think is the bigger issue when it comes to, going green and protecting our environment?
I just think it's really important to remember that cows are only 2% of greenhouse gas emissions, and agriculture in general in the United States, or as a whole, is 9% of greenhouse gas emissions. And when you compare that to something like transportation, I think it's really, which is responsible for about 30% of greenhouse gas emissions, I think it's important to remember that we need to eat. That is a necessity for survival. Whereas something that airplanes are really great to have. I travel on planes, and it's great to have rail travel and transportation, but we need to be cognizant of the fact that we shouldn't hamper agriculture's ability to produce food in an efficient manner that can feed our nation and our world, honestly.
Yeah, and families out there who are working to make sure that we get the food that we need and want. Brandy, thank you so much for joining us. People can actually follow you on social media, right? So they can get more information.
Yes, ma'am. You can follow me on Facebook and my blog at Buzzard's Beat, or on Instagram and Twitter at Brandy Buzzard.
All right. I love the blog. Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a
you
great
very
day.
much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. So what I learned from that one, the takeaways from Fox News, if you could hear that, is that some networks are going to be a little bit more aggressive with trying to maybe push your message more. So they use language in there called, Fox was really adamant about using fact checking and calling out, whereas I thought that those terms were aggressive for what my letter actually was. I felt my letter was very respectful, but they kind of wanted to sway it a little bit, and I didn't have much control over that. So you have to be cognizant that different networks are going to use your words to build their story. So again, you have to be careful about what you're saying. Again, have your talking points ready. This was live. MSNBC was taped. This was live. So I got to say my talking points multiple times, specifically 2% of greenhouse gas emissions for cows, and that cows are part of the climate change solution. I got those in there at least twice. I prepped for this interview again with the NCBA issues management team. And then the thing that I didn't do, that I didn't realize that I should have done, is get up early and do my hair and makeup. So, which sounds really stupid, but that gal looked amazing and well put together. And I my interview was at 3:30 and I got up at 5 till 3 and did the bare minimum. Whereas I should have like taken a shower and dried my hair and did it all and put on this full face of makeup. I really think that would have been a better representation, but you know, hindsight's 20/20 and I'm not an early bird. So that's what I did at 3:30 in the morning. But I do like that interview because I was able to get my talking points in. And then this is the third interview. This is CBS. This one happened in August. There was a lot going on in August for me. I had broken my arm, I believe 2 days before this, and also fallen in poison ivy. So as you can see here, my eye is kind of swollen. This whole side, can you guys see my mouse? I don't know, but basically this whole side of my face, the right side of my face where my braid isn't, is covered in poison ivy, and I asked them not to film that side of my face. So this is the CBS interview, and it was much more like professionally set up. So I'll play this one real quick. And another ad, I'm sorry.
It's a reliable phone company.
What's a business?
We'll mute that. Are there any questions in the chat while I'm waiting for this ad to play? Sorry about the ad. I didn't think that would be there.
If anybody has questions, be sure you can add them to the chat, or you can jump on real quick while that ad's playing.
Okay, well, it's done. That was your only opportunity to ask questions. Sorry. Okay.
Major report just out from the UN focuses on the key role of our food and land use in fighting climate.
Oh. I'm sorry, my rural internet is not cooperating at the moment. Well, if I can get it to, I'll let it maybe load in the background, and I'll maybe talk about the,
Fighting climate change. Scientists outlined the results of the 2-year study this morning in Switzerland. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says agriculture, forestry, and other land uses produce nearly half of the world's methane emissions. That's a greenhouse gas that also comes from cows. Adriana Diaz is on a cattle ranch in Greeley, Kansas. Adriana, what are ranchers there telling you?
Well, Anthony, good morning. Ranchers say it's not efficient to eat less meat as a way to fight climate change. To give you some context, one study says that going vegan for a year will reduce your carbon footprint by half as much as avoiding a single flight to Europe. Still, today's report says that changing your diet can help fight global warming, but many ranchers think the cow climate change connection is overblown.
Rancher Brandy Buzzard says the cattle she raises for beef are part of the solution to climate change, not the problem.
When cattle graze on grass pastures, they are actually improving the grass and what they're grazing on. We are doing everything we can to improve our environmental footprint.
That footprint, according to today's report, contributes to the 44% of methane emissions that come from agriculture, forestry, and human land use. According to the authors, there has been a major growth in emissions from managed pastures due to increased manure deposition. That's right, cow manure emits methane, which can also come from cow burps, yes, cow flatulence. Electricity generation and transportation, like car emissions, make up the majority of U.S. produced greenhouse gases, but cows account for 2.6%.
So I think that we can make more impactful changes in our lives through recycling or walking to work or using public transportation than we can by actually changing what we eat, because it will have such a minimal impact.
But changing what we eat is what the report suggests. It argues in part that eating more plant-based foods and sustainably produced meats can change land use and mitigate climate change.
The purpose of this report is to say that just doing transportation and electricity isn't enough. We need to also think about our land use, and we need to think about agriculture.
That's why some dairy farms, like this one in California, are trapping methane from manure under tarps and converting it to fuel for trucks. At UC Davis, scientists are using...
Okay, I'm going to stop it there because I'm not trying to like steal the show, but that was the end of my segment, and I don't want to take up, I know we're getting close on time here. So that was the CBS piece, and I think some important takeaways from that one is that they're very old school, and their lighting and journalistic integrity is very evident to me, which I appreciated. They were willing to present both sides of it. you know, Adriana Diaz was a gem to work with, and she talked about, you know, that going vegan for a year only saves you the carbon footprint of not even skipping one flight, whereas she also had to quote the numbers from the report. So that I thought was really nice. It's also important to just like on MSNBC, it's important to remember that they might ask you the same question a ton of times, trying to get you to answer it. And if you don't feel comfortable answering it, you can just say, you know, I honestly don't know, or something like that. I can't remember her specific question, but it was, her specific question was like, okay, so cows are only 2%, but can't we do better to reduce it? And I would just keep saying the same thing of, you know, I talked about regenerative grass growth and carbon sequestration and water quality and soil health and how that contributes to improve sustainability. And she just didn't really like that, but that was what I was going to talk about. So I used my talking points the way I wanted to. It was this interview, I really liked this one because I was able to give some of my talking points and speak a bit more at length. My whole feeling, it wasn't just a sound bite like maybe what MSNBC was. But the thing with the CBS interview that I don't have in the slide is that it's really important to remember that if you're going to be in a press interview or a media interview, you can't control what they use your segment in. You can't control what their spin on the story is going to be. The only thing you can control is what you say. So I didn't really like that they repeatedly talked about that report saying that agriculture is responsible for 44%. I didn't like that at all because that's not true, but I can't control that. So you have to be cognizant that all you can control are your words and your actions of what's happening on your ranch, and just keeping that in mind. So that's why prepping and having your talking points ready is so important. So in summary, I think it's really important to be authentic. You notice I was on national TV in a ball cap twice, and that wasn't staged. That's what I look like every day, like except right now I'm on this, but I'm wearing a ball cap most days. The thing that was not authentic about those is that I had makeup on, which I don't do all the time, but I'm very true to myself. I don't want people to think that I'm not realistic or that I'm fake, or that I'm like putting on a charade for the sake of the cameras. That's what I'm like in a ball cap, generally without poison ivy on my face. Think outside the box. So I showed you some of those different Facebook things I do, but also it would have been a lot easier for me to write a letter to Congressman Ocasio-Cortez that was like shaming her and slandered her and said like, you dirty so-and-so, you don't know what you're talking about and all that. And that would have gotten the same amount of attention from the agriculture community on Facebook. But I guarantee you if I had written that letter that was slanderous of her or that called her an idiot or something, which is what a lot of people called her, I would not have been on those TV networks, and I would not have reached probably, you know, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people watching the nightly news on major news networks. So think outside the box. It's easy to write a slanderous article. It's harder to be respectful and write something meaningful, I think, that can resonate with people. So as much as I wanted to write like something that was outrageous and would get all that media hits, it was important to write something that would resonate with an audience. Don't take on more than you are comfortable with or can handle. If you aren't comfortable with with being on TV or having people on your ranch, you can say no, don't do it. It was stressful. I get stressed out every time I have a media interview like that. But again, I believe it's work worth doing. You may not agree with me and you may not have the same kind of like comfort level that I do, and that's totally okay. You do you, but don't take on more than you're comfortable with or that you can handle. No one is going to hold harsh feelings against you. And then remember that we're all human, and that's our common thread. So I just try to remember when people are telling me that I'm a bad mom for feeding my kids GMOs, or that I am cruel to animals because I'm raising them for beef, that we're all human, and that I just try to like bless and release. Bless them and let them go and try not to think about it. So those are my encouraging tips. And with that, I will welcome any questions you guys have. Those are my different ways to contact me, where you can follow me on social media. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. But I am going to exit the show so I can see your faces.
We do have 2 questions, Brandy.
Oh boy, yay.
First one is, any tips for following up with the reporter after they tape or air the story?
I would recommend, okay, good question. I would recommend following up with them. I asked them for pictures. So both of MSNBC and CBS, like, they had a photographer there that was taking pictures, and I thought, well, I need a picture of me on national TV. So that was kind of a good segue for me to stay in contact with them, saying, oh, hey, can you send me some of those pictures? And then later on, it left the door of communication open to say, thank you for coming. It was an honor to be on your segment. You're welcome to come back anytime. So I absolutely recommend that you follow up with them, if nothing else, to say, thank you for having me on your show. Thank you for the opportunity. If you ever have other questions about agriculture, sustainability, cattle, what have you, please feel free to reach out to me. Because I want to remain, I want to be on CBS and MSNBC. I want to be on their call list if another issue like that happens, because hopefully they have trusted me. They thought the segment went well and they want to come back. So I absolutely encourage you to follow up with them. And if nothing else, just say thank you for the opportunity and feel free to contact me again in the future. And get pictures if you need them for Instagram.
One more. Thank you, Brandy. What's the #1 mistake you see advocates make in media interviews, either printed, phone, or video?
Repeating bad press, which is, it's hard not to repeat it. But so hypothetically, let's say tomorrow, I hope this doesn't happen, a report comes out that says beef causes cancer, and you get a call to be on TV. Cannot put beef and cancer in the same sentence when you are answering a question, or pork and cancer, or whatever. You can't put those words together, because even if you're saying, if someone asks you, well, what do you think of the report that came out yesterday? You can't say, well, beef does not cause cancer. It's never been proven, because you've just put beef and cancer in the same sentence. I'm saying it so many times right now, and it's making me really uncomfortable. But you can't put those kind of things together. The way to answer a question like that is to say, doctors from all demographics agree that the best way to avoid cancer is to maintain a healthy diet, get daily exercise, and, some other piece of doctor advice. But like, you can answer it that way without ever putting cancer and the agriculture commodity or the food product in there. And that's the biggest thing I see, is that people repeat a bad headline. They dispute it, saying, no, that isn't the headline. And you're just giving it further footage. Same goes for when I see people, oh my gosh, every time there is a PETA campaign or something with a bad video and they share it and say, they're just giving PETA further footage if you share a video from PETA or something like that. So don't repeat bad press. Please don't repeat bad press.
Does anyone else have any questions? Well, Brandy, we really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. And as an agriculturist, thank you for what you're doing to help spread our message and taking the time. I know you're a busy mom and working for the Red Angus Association, all your different hats that you put on, but you take time to sincerely be an advocate, and you need to be commended for the steps that you take to do that for agriculture. So thank you, and we appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to do it. Like I said, it's work worth doing. And thank you for having me on the webinar today. I've watched these in the past, and this is great to be on here. I didn't think I'd ever be on one, but thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing your knowledge. Shout out to Jakey from Rocking K Productions for sponsoring our monthly coffee and collaborations. Again, we have recorded it, and I will share it on social media here later today or by Friday. Tomorrow is Swine Day here at K-State, and I have a lot to get done here in the next 24 to 48 hours. So, but if it doesn't get up today, I will get it up by Friday. We are still working on our December coffee and collaboration. With the holidays, we're having a hard time confirming speakers. So watch on Facebook. We may skip December because of the holidays and how Wednesdays fall in December, since Christmas is on a December, and so, or on a Wednesday, I apologize. So be watching Facebook. We'll let you know for December. Otherwise, we'll see everybody in January. Thanks, everybody. Have a great Thanksgiving and Merry Christmas if we don't see you till January.